The third shot of tequila was the one that did it. It slid down my throat, warm and reckless, and suddenly I was brilliant. I was a genius. Sitting there in the loud, sticky bar with my friends, Zoe and Olivia, I felt this surge of power. Across the table, my boyfriend, Joshua, was nursing his beer, smiling politely but not really engaging. He was always a bit too quiet for my friends, a bit too stable. And in that tequila-fueled moment, his stability felt like a challenge. So I hatched my plan. It was perfect. I pulled out my phone, shot a conspiratorial wink at Zoe, and hit a random number in my contacts that I knew wouldn't pick up. I let it ring once before hitting decline and holding the phone to my ear. "Oh my God, hi," I chirped, my voice a full octave higher than usual. No, I'm just out with friends." I let the pause hang in the air, a tiny, deliberate cruelty. Joshua looked up from his beer, a flicker of confusion on his face. I turned away slightly, giving him my shoulder. "Yeah, he's here," I giggled into the phone. Just, being himself. I listened to the dead air for a second before delivering the killing blow. "God, you're just so much more fun. I wish you were here instead." I hung up with a flourish and slid my phone back onto the table, beaming at Zoe and Olivia, who were suppressing laughter. "See," I whispered, leaning in so Joshua could definitely hear. "That's how you play the game. You have to keep them on their toes, give them a little reminder that they're not irreplaceable." I expected a reaction from him. Annoyance, maybe a flash of jealousy, even a bit of a fight later. Anything. What I got was silence. I glanced over at him and the smug grin on my face froze. He wasn't angry. He wasn't hurt. He was just looking at me. And his eyes, which were usually so warm and full of life, were completely blank. It was like watching a switch being flipped, a light going out. He just stared at me, and for the first time that night, I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. But the tequila was still in charge, so I just shrugged and ordered another round. He'd get over it. He always did. The cab ride home was a masterclass in suffocating silence. The boozy confidence had evaporated, leaving behind a sticky film of anxiety. The air was so thick with unspoken words, I felt like I was choking on it. When we walked into our apartment, the click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the quiet. I tossed my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door, the clatter echoing unnervingly. I decided to go for Breezy. Breezy was my go-to when I knew I'd pushed a boundary. "Hey," I said, forcing a laugh as I kicked off my heels. "Don't be so serious. It was just a joke, for God's sake. You know what girls are like after a few drinks." He didn't move. He just stood in the middle of our living room, his jacket still on, looking at me as if he'd never seen me before. "Harper," he said, and his voice was so calm it was terrifying. It wasn't the voice of someone gearing up for a fight. It was the voice of someone who had already checked out. "Why did you do that?" My defensiveness flared up instantly, a shield against the dread that was now creeping up my spine. "Do what? Make a prank call?" "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was dating my grandfather." "Lighten up, Josh. It was a stupid, harmless joke." "It wasn't harmless," he said, shaking his head slowly. The movement was small, but it felt like an earthquake. "You weren't telling a joke, you were sending a message. You were telling me, in front of your friends, that I'm not enough. That I'm a placeholder. You used me as a punchline to make yourself look cool." The accuracy of his words stung, so I lashed out. "Oh, here we go. You're always so sensitive. You can't take a single bit of teasing without turning it into some big existential crisis. It's exhausting." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just absorbed the insult, and a look of profound weariness settled over his features. "You're right," he said softly. "It is exhausting." He looked past me, at the life we'd built in that apartment, the photos on the wall, the stupid souvenirs from our trip to Oregon, the half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. "This is exhausting. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me, Harper. I just can't." Before I could even process what he was saying, he walked past me and into our bedroom. I heard the closet door slide open. I stood there, frozen, listening to the quiet, methodical sounds of him packing a bag. It wasn't angry packing. It was final. He walked out of the bedroom a few minutes later with his gym duffel bag slung over his shoulder. It wasn't big, but it was big enough. It held everything he needed to not be here anymore. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. This wasn't happening. This was just another one of his dramatic, overly principled moments. He'd cool off. He'd be back by morning. So that's it. I demanded, my voice cracking with a mixture of disbelief and fury. You're just leaving, over a stupid phone call. He paused at the door, his hand on the knob, but he didn't turn to look at me. It was never about the phone call, Harper, you know that. And with that, he opened the door and walked out, closing it gently behind him. There was no slam, no final, angry words. Just a quiet, decisive click. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the door, expecting the sound of his key back in the lock. Nothing. The silence in the apartment was suddenly a physical presence, pressing in on me. The hum of the refrigerator felt like a roar. And then, the shock receded, and a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated rage crashed over me. How dare he? How dare he make me feel this way? I snatched my phone and immediately called Zoe, pacing the living room like a caged animal. You will not believe what just happened. I practically screamed into the phone, gesturing wildly at the empty space where he used to be. Joshua just broke up with me. Because of the phone call, can you believe the nerve? He's acting like I shot his dog. No way, Zoe's voice crackled back, dripping with the kind of cynical validation I was desperate for. He's insane, it was so obviously a joke. God, some guys have such a fragile ego. Exactly, I shouted, feeling a surge of vindication. It's not fair. I make one little mistake, one stupid joke, and he throws away 2 years. He's the one with the problem, not me. Her agreement was the only permission I needed. For the next 2 days, I lived inside a fortress of my own anger. It was my fuel and my shield. I bombarded Joshua's phone with a barrage of messages, each one a monument to my own self-deception. I started with pure rage. Are you seriously throwing away 2 years for this? You're pathetic. Then they morphed into condescending explanations, as if I were speaking to a child. It was a joke. JOK, look it up if you're confused. It's what people with a sense of humor do. I'd hit send and stare at the screen, my thumb hovering over his contact photo. I checked his last seen on WhatsApp obsessively. Last seen today at 9:42 a.m. He was alive. He was on his phone. He was just ignoring me. The thought made my blood boil. I'd see his toothbrush still in the holder in the bathroom and fire off another text. Don't forget to come get your stuff, unless you want me to throw it in the trash. When silence was his only reply, the messages took on a tone of magnanimous, performative forgiveness. Okay, you've made your point. You were hurt. I get it. I forgive you for overreacting. You can come home now. I even added a winky face emoji, a pathetic attempt at reclaiming the breezy, in-control persona I'd had at the bar. I'd hit send and stare at the screen, waiting for the 3 little dots to appear. But the dots never came. The little delivered receipt under each message was a silent, gray tombstone. My phone, usually a source of constant connection, became a symbol of my isolation. A brick in my hand, heavy and useless. The anger that had been my shield was beginning to crack under the weight of his absolute, impenetrable silence, revealing the terrified, confused person cowering behind it. By day 3, the rage began to curdle into a low-grade, gnawing panic. The silence wasn't a tactic anymore, it was a wall. A solid, unbreachable fortress. I woke up on the 4th day to the deafening quiet of the apartment. His side of the bed was cold and unnaturally neat. The indentation his head always left on his pillow was gone. I reached for my phone, a Pavlovian impulse, and opened our chat. The delivered receipts were still there, mocking me. I typed out, "Please just talk to me," my fingers trembling. I hit send, it didn't go through. A small, red exclamation mark appeared next to it. Message failed to send. My blood ran cold. I tried again. Failed. I quickly switched to Instagram to send a DM. I searched his name. His profile, usually the first to pop up, was gone. I typed it in manually. Nothing. User not found. It took a few frantic, heart-pounding seconds for the reality to sink in. He hadn't just been ignoring me. He had blocked me. Everywhere. It was a digital execution. The finality of it hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. The anger, my trusty shield, shattered into a million pieces, and all that was left was a raw, gaping terror. He was gone. He had actually, truly left. The apartment, once our shared home, transformed into a museum of my failure. Every object was an artifact of a life I had just incinerated. His stupid, oversized coffee mug sat by the sink, a faint coffee ring at the bottom. The worn-out hoodie he always wore on lazy Sundays was still draped over the back of the armchair. I picked it up and buried my face in it, inhaling the faint, fading scent of him, sandalwood and laundry detergent. That's when I started to cry. Not angry tears, but ugly, heaving sobs of pure, animal loss that tore through my body until I was just a heap on the floor, clutching a piece of clothing like a child. My life ground to a halt. My work performance plummeted as I spent my days in a fog of regret, replaying the bar scene on a torturous, endless loop in my mind. My shrill, fake laugh, my smug, triumphant whisper to Zoe, "That's how you play the game." And his face, that awful, blank look, it wasn't the look of a man who was angry. It was the look of a man who had just realized he was in love with a stranger. A cruel stranger. I had thought I was being clever, a puppet master pulling the strings, but I wasn't. I was just a fool, performing a cheap, cruel trick for an audience that didn't even matter. The high-minded indignation I'd felt just days before seemed like a distant memory from a different person. Now all I could see was the truth. It wasn't a joke. It was a character reveal. In my desperate attempt to look like the cool, detached girl who held all the cards, I had shown him exactly who I was. Someone who would casually humiliate him for a cheap laugh and the approval of her friends. Someone who saw his love not as a gift, but as a weakness to be exploited. The need to find him, to explain, to take it all back, became a physical ache. It was a hunger that gnawed at me day and night. I became a digital archaeologist, digging through the ruins. I'd spend hours scrolling back through our old photos, my own smiling face mocking me. Look at her, so happy, so oblivious. What an idiot. I'd reread our old text conversations, the I love yous, and inside jokes now feeling like daggers. My obsession took on a new, more pathetic form. I created a fake Instagram account, a Finsta with a generic nature photo and a nonsensical username, just so I could find his profile again. And I did. It was private. But I could see his profile picture, a new one, taken with friends at a baseball game. He was smiling. He looked lighter. I started going through his followers list, clicking on random profiles, trying to guess who he might be staying with, searching for any sign of him in the background of someone else's story. I had gone from being his partner to being his stalker. I was no longer trying to win an argument. I was just a desperate, pathetic beggar, pleading for a single word from a ghost. A week of this self-inflicted torture passed, each day bleeding into the next in a haze of sleeplessness and stale coffee. I was a ghost in my own life. Finally, hitting a new level of desperation, I did the one thing I had been avoiding because it felt like the ultimate admission of defeat. I called Sam. Sam was our Switzerland. He'd been friends with Joshua since college, but he'd always been kind and welcoming to me. He was the one person I thought might still be a bridge across the chasm I'd created. He picked up on the third ring. "Harper, hey, is everything okay?" His voice was cautious, guarded. "Sam, I need your help," I stammered, the words catching in my throat. I messed up. I messed up so badly. Joshua won't talk to me. He's blocked me. Can you please just ask him to call me? I just need to explain. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him sigh, a heavy, weary sound that told me everything I needed to know. "Harper, I don't think that's a good idea," he said gently. "He needs some space right now." "No, you don't understand," I pleaded, my voice rising with hysteria. "It was just a stupid joke. He's blowing this whole thing out of proportion. He can't just throw everything away over one stupid night." Another silence. This one was longer, heavier. When he finally spoke again, the gentleness was gone, replaced by a quiet, firm resolve. "Harper," he said, and his tone was serious. "It wasn't just one night, and it wasn't a joke to him. You know about his ex, right? About what happened with Amelia." The name hit me like a bucket of ice water. Amelia? Joshua had mentioned her only once, early in our relationship. He'd been vague, just saying the breakup was bad and had involved a lot of games and dishonesty. He never wanted to talk about it, and I never pushed. It was his past, his baggage. It had nothing to do with us. He told me a little," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Sam sighed again. "He told you she cheated on him, Harper. But he probably didn't tell you how. She didn't just sleep with someone else. She spent months playing these little tests on him, flirting with other guys in front of him to make him jealous, making up stories to see if he'd get angry. She was constantly trying to prove she had power over him. The final straw was when he found out she'd been seeing someone else for weeks, all as part of some twisted game to test his commitment. Sam's words landed like individual hammer blows, each one shattering a piece of my self-delusion. "What you did at the bar," he continued, his voice devoid of judgment but full of devastating clarity. "That little performance with your phone for you, it was a joke." For him, it was like watching a horror movie he'd already lived through. "You didn't just cross a line, Harper. You took his deepest, most painful trauma, the very thing that made him terrified of not being able to trust someone, and you reenacted it. You did it for laughs, in front of everyone. You basically stood up and announced that you were no different from the one person who completely broke him." The phone felt impossibly heavy in my hand. The room started to spin. It wasn't about a red line anymore. I hadn't just stepped over it. I had taken a running leap, built a bonfire on it, and danced around the flames, laughing. The call with Sam ended a few minutes later, though I barely remember what else was said. I hung up the phone and just sat there, on the edge of my unmade bed, the silence of the apartment finally making sense. It wasn't just quiet, it was the sound of a verdict being delivered. Guilty. It's been a month now since that night. A month of living in the crater I created. I go through the motions of life. I get up, I go to work, I smile at my coworkers. I even go out with Zoe and Olivia, who have moved on to complaining about their own boyfriends, their own trivial dramas. I sit there and nod along, offering the same shallow reassurances they once gave me. I'm sitting in that coffee shop now, the one on Maple Street, where Joshua and I used to spend our Sunday mornings. He loved their terrible, bitter drip coffee. I always got a latte. I'm pretending to read a book, but I've been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. I pull out my phone and text Zoe. "Honestly, I'm so much better off without him," I type, the lie feeling slick and oily under my thumbs, realizing how boring he actually was. It's like I can finally breathe. She replies with a string of celebratory emojis. I force a small, tight smile, but as I lower the phone, my eyes drift to the empty chair across from me. I can almost see him sitting there, see the way he'd crinkle his nose when he laughed, the way he'd steal the foam off the top of my latte with his finger. And the smile on my face crumbles. A hot, sharp tear escapes and rolls down my cheek. I wipe it away furiously, glancing around to see if anyone noticed, and that's when I see him, through the large window on the other side of the street. It's him. He's walking with a girl, someone I don't recognize. She's laughing at something he said. He looks calm. Not happy, not ecstatic, just peaceful. There's a lightness to his posture that I haven't seen in a long, long time. He isn't haunted anymore. He doesn't see me. They're just two people walking down the street on a sunny afternoon. My heart seizes in my chest, a painful, violent clench. I'm frozen, a statue in a cafe, watching my entire past walk away from me. They turn the corner and are gone. My hands are shaking. I pick up my phone again, my thumb hovering over his grayed-out contact. I open the blocked message thread, the graveyard of my unanswered pleas. My fingers move on their own, typing out the only true words I've felt in a month. I was wrong. I stare at the 3 simple words on the screen. It's everything I need to say and nothing at all. I look at the send button, that little paper airplane that could launch this pathetic little message into the void. My thumb hovers over it for a long, agonizing moment. Then, with a shuddering breath, I press the backspace key, deleting it, letter by letter, until the screen is blank once more.